Hi everybody, I'm Brian from Mantra. It's a pleasure to be able to show you a little bit of behind the scenes of Mandala and how we can create a basic preset. Preface, Mandala is built around a complex matrix of RTPCs or real-time parameter controls. These are just envelopes that instead of just being static and they're being triggered, let's say by a single sample, all the controls are actually non-linear. So I'm just controlling one of the three main parameters. You can quickly and non-linearly be doing hundreds of different things in the background, changing different volumes, effects, parameters, all kinds of different things. We're not just stuck in a linear form. Most music software are based on a linear perspective. When we thought of Mandala, we really wanted to take the essence of what happens in video game engines and how they react in a non-linear form. The first thing you want to do is load one of our instruments. Click on the top left-hand side here. Under the preset browser, let's load pyramids. So you click on pyramids, load the default one. I've loaded it, everything is reset. The way it works is that we have a perform window. Animations and controls are dynamic in the sense that like where they are within the window change depending on the instrument. So we have three main control axes. We have X, Y, and Z. And as you can tell, the mouse, wherever you're hovering over, it changes the shape to delineate which control you're doing. You can also control it here if you prefer the old school style of doing it. It's nice to be able to just go in there and play with the animation. If you want to load a sample map, simply click on the sample name here and you're going to get the sampler browser. Let's try the Glass Crush. Or getting around, you do have the arrows here. So you can very quickly load the next sample map. For this first sampler, the same controls that are in the front are also on the side here. For all the samplers, you've got two sets of volumes that are controlled by Y and the X. But the way that it works is that your Y is the main control that will come first. Next in line is the X parameter. You can change the volume there as well. So let's do something very basic. I've loaded a sound, and as you can tell, let me bring it down to 0. And there's no sound. And as I'm bringing it up, it's going up. If you want to quickly mix between two samples, just go on the level of the X axis. Let's bring down one side. And on the other, let's do the complete opposite. I'm going to just play one set of sounds. Yeah, that feels good. If you right click, you can actually change the curvature. I like to create an equal power crossfade between them. That way it feels more cohesive. Yeah, that's feeling pretty good. For this one, we're only going to use two samplers. After the matrix, you've got dedicated sampler controls. So what I'm going to do first is actually set all these to be controlled by velocities. You can have other samples coming in with the quiet part and then other samples that come in also that are layered on the loud part. There's no limit, and you can very specifically sculpt whatever parameters you want and make it your own. On the sampler level, you've got three main slots that you can add effects to each sampler. These are pretty easy to load. Let's say if I want to add a filter after the matrix, assignable to anything. Either the X, the Y, or the Z axis. But where it gets even more interesting is when you start loading modulators. Usually the Y is intensity within a preset that we create. I use the X axis as a crossfader between these two samplers. So we've got the Z axis, which I like to use as my effects. It looks like a sun or a background. Let's switch to a reverb so we can really hear the difference. Let's maybe add a solar reverb here. This table is on the sampler level. They're controlling the dry wet. We kept it very simple like this because once we get to the global effects, you're going to be able to do way more with it. What if we filter it a little bit so that it can change the character of it? Why don't we put a low pass on it? Let's try it quickly just so we can hear it. See, it's 100% here. That's great. I'm just going to assign it to modulator 1. It's not doing anything yet. You go into the animod page, which is at the bottom here. Turn it on. Let's set it to a basic LFO, a sine wave. I'm going to slow it down a little bit and give it a full range. If we're at full range, you're going to see the motion here. And if we go back to the sampler, hey, it's moving. Let's hear what it sounds like. Yeah, that's cool. Let's speed it up a little bit more. Let's see how that feels. Not bad. Maybe I wanted to move a little bit more within this and just have a bit more variety and not so much extremes. Yeah. That's feeling pretty good. This is dry. And what happens if we bring in the other sound? Nice. I'm going to bring this down maybe an octave so we have a little bit of a differentiator. Now let's pay some attention to the second sampler in Pyramid 2. So let me load one of these cork style filters. I'm going to choose one of the styles, make it maybe a different shape. So it's just complementing, doing its own little thing. Yeah, that's feeling pretty good. Why don't we do another reverb? That's going to work really nicely too. Let's do something like a freeze reverb. That's nice. I want it to curve up so that it really happens just at the very end. It's creeping in, and then, yeah, that hits you. More fun is when we get into the global effects. The global effects work in the same way. You can add any kind of effect. Why don't we create something that's like a mass reverb so we get a wall of ambient sound, but with some movement in there. This solar reverb is still my favorite. What we're going to do, add it to the Z parameter. And now we're 100%. Interesting thing about the global effects is that you can start to also do dynamic things with the parameters. You've got access to all the 3 parameters here. So let's do something where the time, as I'm going, it's going to get bigger. And as you're seeing the knob here, I'm changing both the... Maybe I wanted to also flare out or detune as we're going back down. So set it to the flare, and I'm going to change it to the Y parameter. But what's going to happen is as you're going down, yeah, that works. And as we're going up, it stabilizes. It's very subtle, and it only happens right at the end. Let's bring up the volume. Yeah, right away with 2 sounds and just some very basic effects. Once you start adding things like the sequencer, you can really start to dig in. Why don't we just turn it on quickly just to see what happens? Nice. Let's randomize some stuff. Yeah. Set this also to less steps. If you want to save presets, it's very simple. You can create your own type. Let's call this test, for example, and set it up as our type. I go here. Let's call it experiment 1 or something, or experimental. Not a very exciting name, but why not? Let's call this 1. In the next tutorial, we'll start with this preset and see how far we can transform it into something completely different. Thank you so much, and we'll see you pretty soon.